What? Dog! Kazuma! That's my name.
So a while back I made a video on the interview between the author of Classroom of the Elite Shono Kinugasa and the artist and illustrator Tomose Shunkasu that was released in the new art book for Classroom of the Elite. However, at the time there were only a few translations for it, but thanks to my partner Royal MTLs we were able to get the full translation for the whole interview, and there's a lot. And I didn't want to edit a 20-minute video or longer just to get through this whole thing, so I decided that the best way to go over long form content is to just discuss it here on the podcast. That's literally the reason why I have it, so yeah, that's what we're doing today. So as usual, you can just put your phone down or leave it in the background while I talk, and with that said, let's get into it. So the interview starts off with an editor saying, first off, I'd like to hear more in detail about the new characters from the second year arc. It was revealed that among them an assassin targeting ayanokoji emerged, introducing 6 new first year students. Starting with the first one, who appeared on the cover of the first volume of the second year arc alongside ayanokoji, is the blonde beauty with long hair, Nan Subasa. How was Nanase's design decided? So we start off with Tomose, who says, I went through quite a bit of rejection from Kinugasa sensei, and he laughs. Kinugasa says, did I reject it? Well, I think I did. Tomose says, I think Kinugasa sensei was really into the second year arc's new characters. I drew about 5 designs for each character. I would really like if Tomose released like the early designs. Can you imagine what Yagami, Masawa, and Nanase look like before we know what they look like now? I think that would be really cool to see, to be honest. So continuing, Kinugasa says, really? Tomose says, it seems like you don't remember anything. So the editor says, what was Nanase's initial design and how did it settle into the final version? Tomose responds by saying, I was drawing Nanase as a typical beauty, but I kept being told her eyes looked different from the rest of the girls, and eventually her eyes became round and big. The editor says, the finished illustration gives off the impression of a character with puppy-like round eyes. Tomose responds to that by saying, I think her eyes turned out to be quite large, with a bit more white showing. What was your initial image of her, Kinugasa sensei? Now Kinugasa says, I can't remember at all. The editor says, story-wise, Nanase appeared with an air of mystery from the beginning. She seemed active and straightforward, but there was a sense of mystery in her words and actions. Tomose says, mysterious is the feeling, I guess. I wanted to create a character like that. Since she first appears in the second year arc, her true identity is unknown. So I drew the first 6 characters thinking that they all seem to have something going on. Kinugasa says, no good, I still can't remember. The editor responds with, that's too bad, and laughs. Hopefully as the interview goes on, your memory will come back. The second character is Ichika Masawa, right? She's a completely different type from Nanase, but where did the idea for her come from? Tomose responds by saying, I wanted to create a character with a slightly suspicious aura. I thought it would be nice to have a bewitching character. There are about 3 female characters, right? I thought it would be good to have one in a bewitching role. The editor says, indeed, among the kohai, she feels a bit more cheeky than Nanase and the others. Tomose says, that's right, there are various ways to be mysterious, aren't there? Like being hard to read or having a sexy atmosphere. I wanted to create a contrast with Nanase. Now this is a very interesting mindset, and you can very well see it depicted in the light novel because Masawa, she likes to come off as a bit more sensual, more intimate compared to Nanase, who's more of a reserved and curious type. There's definitely like a contrast between their demeanors, and I really like how it's explained here. So the editor says, was there a reason for her hairstyle? Tomose says, yes, I wanted to give off a gyaru vibe, like the idea of a sexy gal. By the way, if you didn't know, a gyaru is reference to a Japanese fashion subculture characterized by dyed hair, tanned skin, and highly decorated nails, emphasizing a glamorous and rebellious look. So the editor says, I'm starting to see the trend from back then, moving from Masawa to the third character, Subaki Sakurako. Subaki Sakurako. She's also mysterious but in a cool or quirky way. What do you think, Kinugasa? Now Kinugasa says, I was just listening from a fan's perspective. Tomose says, no, I'm just following Kinugasa-san's directions. Now Kinugasa looks at Tomose's old illustrations and says, you're showing a design, aren't you? But looking at it doesn't bring back any memories, and he laughs. Tomose says, that's terrible, and he laughs as well. I presented about 7 designs for Subaki and they kept getting rejected. 7 designs? Jesus bro, I really want to see these now. Honestly, if Tomose put the rough drafts for the characters in a separate art book, I think I would actually buy that. What do you guys think? So the editor says, so it was like Nanase 5, Masawa 5, and Subaki 7. I don't think we've had patterns for the girls before, so that's a good story. Kinugasa says, I usually say okay right away, but I must have been anxious surely, because we were resetting the title. I think he's talking about going from year 1 to year 2. The editor says, resetting the title is a bit scary, isn't it? Moreover, it wasn't like we had been doing it for a long time. To stop while still in the first year arc, that's a story you don't hear often. Tomase responds with, even in a series, changing the title can sometimes lead to a drop in popularity. That's true. I can't think of any series that did that off the top of my head. Wait, Tokyo Ghoul Re. I think that's a good example. The editor says, now we talk about the second year arc as if it's normal, but at the time it was terrifying. We were publishing art books and holding events, doing everything we could to hype it up, so I understand the feeling of presenting 5 designs, 7 designs. Tomase says, when the second year characters lined up, I was concerned about whether they would look good. I was quite mindful of the visuals. Kinugasa says, even when I look at the rejected illustrations of Subaki now, I still think they're not right. Looking at the final design, I feel that characters like Masawa and Subaki are not something you'd see in Tomase-san's previous works. Tomase says, that's right. In the end, the design turned out to be quite different from what I usually draw. Both Nanase and Subaki turned out better after being rejected, so I am thankful. Kinugasa says, the past me was indeed amazing, and he laughs. Tomase says, exactly. I often think that the first drafts wouldn't have worked. They were too much of a habit. What does he mean by a habit? The editor says, the key visuals for the first year arc and the second year arc also feel completely different. Tomase says, that's right. The way of thinking changes too after 7 or 8 years. Now the editor says, let's move on to the new first year boys. Please tell us about Hosen, who made a big impact right from volume 1. It felt like a real delinquent had arrived. Tomase says, it's easier to draw characters who are angry. I can draw them freely. I wanted to create a dangerous guy, and he laughs. I did consider the existing characters while drawing him like a tough guy. The editor says, the illustrations were also powerful from the start with a knife stabbing scene. Kinugasa-san, what did you think of Hosen? Kinugasa says, well, it was just like that. He laughs. There was nothing to complain about. It was just as I imagined. The editor says, next up is Utomiya. Even now in the sophomore arc, it's hard to tell what kind of character Utomiya is. What do you think about the design, Tomase-san? Tomase says, I came up with about 4 patterns changing the hair from long to short, but I think this character would be really cool and active. Surprisingly, they didn't play as big a role, and he laughs. I wanted to draw a super handsome guy. What's going on, Kinugasa-san? Kinugasa says they will play an active role from now on, and he laughs. The real star will appear later on. Ooh, this is interesting. I'm kinda betting on Ishigami just because he's been sidelined for a while, so much so that it feels intentional, as if he's being saved for something specific. Maybe it could be someone else, who knows. Tomase says, I was hoping to draw lots of handsome guys, so I'm looking forward to it. The editor says, the sophomore arc will continue to progress. It will be fun to see just how much of an enigma Utomiya is, including what comes after. The third one is Yagami. Tomase says, Yagami was totally different from what Kinugasa-sensei initially imagined, right? It was supposed to be a cooler, more dashing character. As we received feedback and made progress, it became cuter. Kinugasa says, at first it felt different. What I vaguely remember is that when we lined up these 6 characters, it didn't quite fit. Since all the guys were turning out to be cool types, I thought maybe we could balance it out with a more youthful looking appearance. Tomase says, I see. So Kinugasa-sensei also thinks about the visual balance when they're lined up, and he laughs. Kinugasa says, I do think about it, and he laughs as well. But that reminded me. While keeping the sophomore arc's key visual in mind, I repeated the process of lining them up and adjusting the characters. Tomase says, you're surprisingly serious. As an artist, it's easier to draw when there's a variety of characters. It's just hard to draw when similar looking girls are lined up, so I'm grateful that you're conscious of that. In the end, Yagami also became a bit of a klutz, didn't they? The editor says, it ended up with them saying something like, I'm the real genius, right? Kinugasa says, that's where the illustration made fine adjustments to the personality. If the face was different, I think the development would have been different too. The editor says, so it was already decided that Yagami was the culprit. Kinugasa says, that's right. So now the editor says, next there's one more freshman, Ishigami. Tomo says Kinugasa-sensei was quite particular about Ishigami-kun, right? I presented several versions, but you kept saying no, not quite. He's like the final boss, isn't he? Kinugasa says, unlike the other characters, his name was revealed early on, and there were lines over the phone, so readers had already formed a vague image of him. It's difficult to create a character that satisfies that image. I felt like the bar was set high unintentionally. Tomose says Ishigami-kun's bar was set high. It's been like that for a while, and he laughs. Kinugasa says, when I saw the initial design, I thought, no, this is a bit weak. Not that it was bad, and he laughs as well. Tomose says, I thought he was getting stronger and stronger. And Kinugasa says that's right, but he is not physically strong like Hosen, who obviously looks like a tough character, but I wanted someone who you could tell was strong just by the drawing. Tomose says that's a really high bar, and he laughs. Kinugasa says it's easy for the one making the request, and he laughs as well. The editor says his hair is also tied back, giving him a unique atmosphere, right? Kinugasa says, was it like that from the beginning? And Tomose says it was tied up at first, but the way it was tied and the look in the eyes have changed a lot. Honestly, I don't even know what this character would look like from the front, and he laughs. The editor says, what about the only new third-year student, Kiruin Fuka? Now we're talking, here we go. You guys already know Kiruin is my favorite character, so I'm gonna make sure I read this part very carefully. Tomose says, Kiruin is still the most challenging character to draw for me. The first time I drew her sitting down was for the volume 2 illustration of the second year arc, and I personally think it's the best and coolest depiction. You are so right. That illustration was definitely a very good way to just introduce her into the series. Kiruin, in my opinion, has one of the best introductions in the series. I would put her up there with Tsukishiro, Yagami, Masawa, and so on. So continuing, Tomose says there are times when it's frustrating because I can't quite capture the essence I achieved in that rough sketch. Kiruin also went through a bit of criticism. Oh, did she? And Tomose says for some reason Kinugasa-sensei became more strict in the second year students edition. Kinugasa says, well, the important parts, right? And Tomose says, that's right, but in the end, I'm glad I was criticized. The editor says, does Kinugasa have something against Kiruin? What? Kinugasa says there are settings that only I hold internally, not shown outwardly. For example, the white room or timelines that haven't been depicted or the past. There are several important characters in the background and Kiruin is one of them. Although not shown in the main story, I have prepared this character and personally really like them. However, they have the sad fate of not being able to be shown in the main student edition. Now this is interesting because it definitely confirms that Kiruin definitely will have a part after the story. He's basically saying it right here. Then after graduation, there will be a role for her outside of the advanced nurturing high school, and I think Kinugasa also said he wants to continue this story just a little bit outside of the school. So I'm very excited to see what he has in store for Kiruin because he's also set up a lot of possibilities for her by, introducing her family, her lineage, and also in year 2 volume 11, he's putting it out there that she has the ambition of being a politician, which is something that we know has heavy influence in Classroom of the Elite. Politics is a recurring theme in the series and it has heavy influence in even Ayanokoji's upbringing because the founding of the White Room came from a political origin. So continuing, the editor says, the person themselves wanted to repeat a year but couldn't. Tomose says, didn't you say we might meet Kiruin after graduation? Kinugasa says, right. That setting exists in my mind. Tomose says it feels like there's quite an epic story to follow. Kinugasa says because that setting exists, I want to bring it out. It's a character with a strong will for the future. The editor says the character with 3 character kanji names have a suspicious aura, don't they? Kinugasa says indeed. The editor says moving on, a lot of new characters appeared in the second year students edition, but can we start with Himeno Yuki from class B? She's a completely different type of girl from before. It felt like a modern girl had arrived. Tomose says when you think by yourself, things start to become similar, so I've started to seek advice from others. Kinugasa says it's a bit hard to understand women's fashion, isn't it? Tomose says exactly. I'm not sure what's trendy and my sense is starting to drift, and he laughs. I definitely want to ask people who are up to date. I watch VTubers and think that style might be good. 2-tone colors are in fashion and so is the landmine-like look. The editor says the hair colors are quite varied and cute. Kinugasa says we haven't had that before. And the editor says it's like a Korean style adding just a bit of vivid color. And Tomose says I've been trying to brighten around the eyes a little, incorporating Korean style makeup. I look at actual idols while doing it. Women definitely have a superior sense of the times. The editor says next is Amikura Mako. Was she designed for the anime? Tomo says, I also designed Amikura. There are quite a few characters like that, like the girl who bullied Karuizawa. The editor says in that sense, Amikura is quite an old age character design wise. She has a ponytail but it feels different from Karuizawa, more put together. Tomose says, I thought it would be bad if they overlapped, so I made her ponytail next. It's crazy because even though you tried not to make them overlap, they still do because Amikura quite literally looks like the black hair version of Kei. The editor says next is Watanabe Kinji. He's been getting more screen time recently. Hinugasa says he's personally one of my favorite characters. Tomose says he's a really good guy, isn't he? The most normal one. The editor says it feels like a character from a different world has entered. Hinugasa says not at all. Tomose says no, there aren't many like him, and he laughs. But Watanabe-kun was difficult. It's really hard when you're told to make someone normal. Drawing a character with an average 5-minute haircut feels somewhat off. Why did Tomose roast the character that he drew? He said an average 5-minute haircut. Anyways, continuing. Everyone's image of Watanabe-kun in their heads is definitely different, right? What do you think? Is the original image of Watanabe-kun different from Kinugasa-sensei's? Kinugasa says even looking at the painting it just comes naturally. The editor says, I felt the same way. Originally, the character didn't have much personality, but this illustration made me realize he's a guy who cares about his appearance but lacks confidence. Tomose says right, he's a bit shy, just enough not to overdo it with his hair. The editor says next is Nishiko Takako. Who? I never thought she would be on the cover. Tomose says, I really like Nishino. Characters like her are easy to draw. You know what I mean? I don't think anyone would complain about her looks. I thought she wouldn't be too picky, so I gave her senpaku eyes and plump lips, fully indulging my taste. Jesus, Tomose. Kinugasa says, isn't it difficult to make a girl look normal? Every girl that appears in the work ends up cute. It's hard to find or create a girl with a normal face level. Tomose says, actually, I prefer to draw them less perfect. If they're all cute, they all end up looking the same. As an artist, I want to draw girls who aren't cute. That sounds a bit harsh though. Kinugasa says, a normal balance. It's difficult, isn't it? Some people might find them cute, but I wonder. Tomose says, I like girls with unique cuteness. I really want to draw them, but to make a girl universally cute, you have to fine-tune a lot. Kinugasa says, if you're aiming for a universal appeal, that's true. Tomose says, then I start to think this might not work and such. In that sense, a character like Nishino allows me to do whatever I want. Kinugasa says, but her appearance level is high, isn't it? She becomes a bit of a beauty. Tomose says, I made her a bit cuter considering her coupling with Ishizaki. Kinugasa says, I would have dared to make her just normal though, and he laughs. Now the editor comes in and says, if everyone is cute, it becomes an unbelievable school, right? The reality becomes dubious. But then again, we don't really want to see what's truly normal, so it's difficult. Kinugasa says that's true, and he laughs. Now the editor says in a group of normal girls, she would be an extraordinary beauty, but among perfect beauties, she's a girl with quirks not quite there. That's probably the type of girl everyone wants, so in that sense, it might be the right answer. Kinugasa says, ideally, yes. I understand making her a bit of a beauty, but as a creator, I would be happiest if I could produce a truly normal girl. Tomose says, then the term beauty would carry more weight. Kinugasa says, exactly. The main heroine is super cute, isn't she? Tomose says, when watching the anime, if everyone is cute but someone is treated as a beauty, I wonder if they're really that beautiful. They're all cute, and he laughs. Kinugasa says, right? I hate it when they say she's just normal but she's actually really cute. Tomose says, I don't want to make everyone cute, I just want to draw various faces. Now Tomose says it's fun to have round-faced girls and long-faced girls. Kinugasa says, exactly, I want to create more characters like that, but I guess that's not possible. Tomose says, still, with non-main characters, I like that I can try different things. Where Kinugasa sensei doesn't seem too particular, I inserted my preferred types of girls. Kinugasa says that's a good thing. The editor says, next is Onera Cayo. Onera has probably been around since the first volume of the freshman arc. Kinugasa says by name, yes. Tomose says, I really like her, and he laughs. I think Onodera is in a similar position to Nishino. The editor says she's a sporty girl who speaks her mind, but she turned out cuter than I imagined. Tomose says, that's the thing. When you draw for the cover, they end up cute. They get a bit beautified. Kinugasa says, it's fate, isn't it? Now from the editor, he says, when you get to someone like Onodera, it's a bit dubious whether they're a sub-character or not. Tomose says, I really wanted to give her double teeth. What? Kinugasa says, I have an image of you liking that sort of thing. What? Tomase says, right? I like 90s anime and stuff, but I was really troubled whether it would resonate today, so I stopped. The editor says, next up is Yamamura Miki. She was on the cover of the second year edition, volume 10. She's been appearing more lately. Tomase says, at first I thought she was a character who wouldn't appear much, so I drew her small, but then I realized she plays a significant role. The editor says she appeared quite early when you think about it. Her first appearance was in the second year edition, the frontispiece of a volume. Kinugasa says, I don't want to put this in the interview article, but Yamamura is also one of my personal favorite characters, so I can't help but bring her out. Aww. The editor says, isn't that the same as with Ibuki? No one believes that. They say something will happen because Kinugasa is biased. Kinugasa says it's not like the characters I like are protected, so that's fine. The editor says it's a mystery that you have to hide your love for Yamamura while openly loving Ibuki. Tomase says, well, maybe you really do like her. The editor says, but her increased appearances are recent, right? Tomase says yes, since the school trip. Kinugasa says, I think that's when the character started to feel right to me. Tomase says, in my mind, she's become like a vending machine character. Is that okay? Kinugasa says, that's right. She's even on the cover. Tomase says, I ended up drawing her with a vending machine on the cover. Kinugasa says, she's always around a vending machine, so it fits. Oh, so that's the reason why he drew that. Interesting, I really like that little detail. Tomase says she's like a fairy character that pops up out of nowhere. The editor says lastly is Morishita Ai. She's only appeared in illustrations in the art book so far. Kinugasa says she's the newest character, right? The editor says yes, a mysterious character who appeared during the winter break. Tomase says, I remember. Kinugasa says she hasn't settled in your mind yet, has she, Tomase-san? The editor says she was on the cover of Comic Alive, the December 2023 issue, but she's not in this art book yet. Tomase says her name isn't equated yet. She's an oddball, isn't she? And by the way, what Tomase meant by that is that he hasn't fully connected the character's name with her personality or her appearance yet. Kinugasa says she's a character with a personality I'm not good at, a character that doesn't sit well with me. Me too, I don't like her either, to be honest. I thought I was the only one, bro. Morishita is just so annoying to me for some reason. But anyways, it's not about me. Tomase says, won't she move for you? And Kinugasa says, I won't say she won't move, but she doesn't move. Tomase says, I did try to draw her as a mysterious girl in terms of looks. Kinugasa says that's correct. Tomase says, I also like front twin tails, 2 braids hanging in the front, but this character is for the future. Kinugasa says, right, for the future. For the future, she's a newcomer. Tomase says, will this girl fall for ayanokoji too? Kinugasa says, I don't think she will. Thank God!
We don't know where we're heading. Always second guessing. But at least the nights are warm and we're still breathing.